Um, but it brought up a whole discussion about stillness, and we watched a clip that was very, very cool from the 49th parallel. So I want to rewatch that clip. I'm going to watch a couple other clips. I keep referencing Mark Rylance, so it's time for us to watch a little Mark Rylance. And I also want to watch the opposite, which is like some Philip Seymour Hoffman, and talk about big, too big, and not big enough. Less is more, and less is just not enough, depending on the script. So let's talk about less is more, too much and too big, and filling a frame. Um, there is there's a truism, and Michael's very into it and was discussing it, that in stillness in a frame, stillness in your acting can be your best friend in a lot of ways, because when you're still in the frame, the audience has to work. They have to lean in and become active in your work to figure out what's going on with you. You understand? And when you're still in a frame, sometimes the power of your eyes and the stillness of your eyes and what's happening in your socially engaged system allows us to really be sort of penetrate the two dimensions and become part of your thinking and become part of who you are. So stillness can be very, very powerful, can be your best friend in your acting. On the other hand, a lot of actors use stillness as a crutch or as a trick to try to get through a scene when really nothing much is happening. And a lot of actors underplay scenes when it doesn't work. The opposite is behavior and movement and physicality and articulation and expression can be your best friend and can really telegraph to the audience the fullness of who you are, what you're doing, and what's going on inside of you. And can be appropriate for the scene and can be the right thing to do and the right approach. And also, behavior and too much expression and pushing things can become a trick and a habit. And so it's a really dicey little situation we get into talking about stillness, right? So I teach in my class over and over, I teach you guys less is not more, less is just less, and more is too much. It all depends on what the scene needs. But that's wherein it becomes really difficult, because you got to figure out when do I compress myself into a stillness, and when do I permit myself to be full and expressive. So we were watching this clip from the 49th parallel, which is a film from 1939 about Nazis in Canada. And I totally forgot about this movie. It's really fantastic. We need to bring it back. And also, I'm hoping that if we start pushing and talking about it, someone's going to make a remake, because I think we need to make a remake. And about this gentleman's, this actor's unbelievable stillness. Somebody's going to have to look up the actor's name. This guy's incredible stillness. And then I talk about Mark Rylance and how Mark Rylance can do nothing in a frame and completely devastate you because you're so part of what's going on with him. Anthony Hopkins is the same thing. We're going to watch a clip from Anthony Hopkins from Westworld. Then on the other hand, in this clip, you're going to see the opposite. The actor opposite him is doing the exact opposite. He's doing this unbelievably full expression. So it becomes like, when is it right and when is it wrong? And that's what I want to ask you guys, your points of view. When is it right and when it's wrong? So most of the time when you're in an audition or on set, let's hope it's not on set, although it happens. But when you're in an audition and the director says any one of these things, and Michael talked about this is a brutal truth that I've talked about in my audition class. If the director goes, yeah, can you bring it down a little bit? Or, yeah, let's do it again and not so much. Or if they go, it's a little theatrical, or, a little less. Most of the time what they're saying to actors is that's all code for, yeah, you're full of shit and it's actually not real. Like you're acting, you're schmacting, like you're faking it. And so can you just do it for real? And that's painful. Like that can hit a couple actors in the gut. And You should know where you are on the, I'll explain this another time, but on the, what do I call it? The Andre Eileen scale in your real life. Like, how full are you a person in real life, and how miniature are you in real life? I live on the, sitcom side of the full scale. So I know that if I'm not really in the moment, which is, rare, but if I'm not really in the moment and there's something that's throwing me and I'm pushing the scene, then I go to the full end of the scale and I do too much. So it doesn't happen very often, but at times I might get a listen, can you bring it down? The Keanu Nick Cage scale. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah. Yeah, but I prefer it's actors that I respect. Can we make it like Anthony Hopkins to Paul Rudd? Because that, Paul Rudd is like, well, I'm happy that he's one of the richest Canadians alive, but no, I don't know. Well, not really. So I know that my go-to is to like kind of to push. So I have to make sure that I'm like, I don't have to make sure. It's just that if for some reason I'm thrown and I'm thinking and I'm not focused or I'm not emotionally in the scene or I don't know what I'm doing, I'll go to the push it kind of end of the scale. But I have to say to this group, and honestly, that doesn't happen. Like, it will rarely happen because you guys and me, you're trained to make sure that I know each and every moment what I'm doing and my emotions are there and I'm connected and I'm going through. Like, it's very rare for me to be like, pushing or faking it through a moment. But there are takes where you just go, okay, I'm still thinking about craft services. Can we get back to the, okay. Now, other people will do the opposite. When they're not in the scene and they're sort of discombobulated and they're dissociated from the scene or they're detached from the moment, then they do go into like doing nothing. And they do that like TV, like nothing thing. You know what I mean? Neither of those are right. Those are both tricks and they're both go-tos. And you're not allowed to be tricky or go-to. So that's just faking. So less is not less when you're both full of shit, and more is too much when you're full of shit. Your job is to be compressed or expressive based on the demands of the scene itself. And the compression of emotion, it can be a fabulously interesting thing to watch. So, Merritt Weaver, who I'm in love with and unbelievable, she's very compressed in her work. Anthony Hopkins is very compressed in his work, but he also can be extremely expressive. So it's just a matter of the genre, the style, the character, the scene itself, the emotional truth, and then if we're filming like a really tight moment of where you're bringing the audience into your thinking. Liam Neeson is a very compressed actor. So instead of less or more, or even the word stillness, which I've used, some of you might remember, I don't know if any of you were in class at that time. Blake, you may have been in class at that time. I taught an entire month on stillness. We actually did warm-ups where actors would actually sit still and have to look at the other person and not move for 5 minutes and maintain focus without doing anything. And each actor had to sit in front of the class and be rivetingly exciting and make us either weep or laugh or get connected and handle electricity, but they had to stand in class for 3 to 5 minutes doing nothing. And finding this stillness thing and how to get still was so fascinating. But it was it was predicated on the idea that it's stillness on top of explosion. So less is not less, it's less over more. So let's just get rid of those words. It's stillness over electricity. It's calm over chaos. It's in modern dance we do that. You do that kind of thing. I've done that kind of thing as well. But I don't know how you did it, but we would actually do this unbelievable expressive physical dance and then stop and then do nothing. And so it was not static. It's not static. It was stillness on top of like reverberations, right? We're gonna get to that quote in a second because that's really the whole point. And so it becomes a matter of electric calm or controlled chaos. And so stillness is not stillness. It's externally physicalized still on top of internalized chaos and confusion. And so Nankin was talking from a director's point of view, and he's talking about the power of stillness. But on the other hand, I wanted to make sure that actors understood that there are quite a few actors who misunderstand this, and what they do is they simply do nothing. And if they do nothing and they sit still, then it's just a lie. Then they're simply boring. Mr. Rylance is not doing nothing. He's doing everything. And so Nankin said something about this gentleman we're going to watch from 49th Parallel, where he said, in his nothingness, you can read all of his expressions and emotion. And that's the quote that Nankin loved to quote, is this quote here. Thank you very much, Ben Common. The way you hide your feelings tells the audience who you are, is Harry Dean Stanton's quote. The way you hide your feelings tells the audience who you are. But it's not feeling, it's hiding feeling. So the whole point of stillness is the compression of the conflict or the emotion. So if your conflict and emotion is 100% this, I'm trying to do the frame, 100% this way, this is a completely expressed emotion. And then it's an absolute. It's. I know this is a funny metaphor, but this is the vector between my fingers as a line of the emotional conflict of the scene. Okay, and it's 100%. It's not that as I do less, it does this. It's as I do less, it does that. It goes internal. So if I'm totally expressive and out, if I'm doing a scene, if I'm Sean Penn in Mystic River, or if I'm Al Pacino in anything, or if I'm what's some big expressive, if I'm Mel Gibson in Braveheart, like it's all, those are like, and 100 million other examples, it's all externalized. And then as I compress it internally, I become stiller and stiller until it's totally compressed, but it's all on the inside. So it's internal conflict and it's internal emotion. And what's fascinating is that when I'm all external, I go, yeah, Attica or freedom, and I'm really into it. But when it's internalized, I actually have to go, what's going on inside of that person? And I actually lean into it. When you lean into understanding what's going on in their compression, you become it more. So in some ways, there's this, that's correct, there's this vibration happening inside of the actor, and it vibrates inside of you because you have to actually become part of it because you lean in. That's what stillness is. So the same actor can do a scene that's very, 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 very expressive and externalized, and then do a scene in the same film that's very, very, very compressed. But I think what happens with directors and in acting classes and stuff is that the early actor doesn't know that they're enough. And now we're getting to the point really of early acting and why a director like Nankin would have these notes. I love that, by the way, Ben Common. It's like all your protons, neutrons, and electrons are bouncing inside of you, but you're not letting them out. Yes, and while we're talking, if someone can look it up, I don't know if you'll see it, but a long time I put a quote up, but I'm sure you can Google it, which is stillness is an artifice. It doesn't exist because one, besides the atoms going and flaring all around your body, is even if you just look at yourself as a singularity, you're standing on a planet that's spinning. And I don't want to say the kilometers per hour or the miles per hour, someone should look it up, but the planet is spinning. But then the planet itself is spinning around the sun. But the sun itself is spinning at the edge of this galaxy. But the galaxy itself is like spinning in this galaxy cluster. Like when you add it all up, we're all moving at, and I'm going to make a number up completely randomly, we'll look it up later, but like at 900 trillion miles an hour or something. So the idea that you're actually standing still is impossible. And so what you're doing is you're standing still, but you're allowing the vibration of who you are out. So when actors are in acting class are being told less is more, and stop being so theatrical, or don't show me so much, or stop pushing, or it's not that they're No, it's not that less is more, and it's not that stillness is better than expression. It's that they're inappropriately expressing, and the reason why is because they haven't yet found the knowledge. I'm avoiding the word trust. They've found the knowledge that they're enough, that they can compress emotion, look at the other person, and live through the life of the actor. So the process of learning acting, and I'm talking to a pretty high-end class right now, but the process of learning acting is when you first come to acting, sound and movement and nouns, and get that energy up and emotional preparation, and then do a scene from Serpico, or do a scene from, I got lots of fuck yous, and like a scene where it's like Rachel getting married, and a lot of like movement. And what you're doing is you're getting actors to break out of their heads and get comfortable with the idea of affecting change in somebody else without having to think. And when they've figured that out and they've got their surrender, then you start to pull back, and then the scenes become less physical and less externalized, until you finally get to a scene like, I'm looking at Abby right there, who did the scene from Signs, and George, wherever George is, and they sat and they did the scene where the brothers are watching a television set in Signs, and it's the whole thing had to be at 1.1 on 100 in energy level. They've got two little kids sitting, sleeping on them, and they're watching a TV set. But they're talking about death and the end of the world and the lack of faith in God and quitting and giving up on their lives. It's like huge emotion, but it's all compressed. And then when you watch Joaquin Phoenix in it and Mel Gibson, they're so compressed in the scene. If you watch Casey Affleck in Manchester by the Sea, so compressed. Someone should actually YouTube that, a scene from Manchester by the Sea, and throw it on there. So what happens is, as actors get better at knowing that they can get out of their heads, not think, and get connected to the other character, and allow the forward movement, then you can start taking away the conflict here, and it starts to internalize more, until finally you get to They Shoot Horses. And when Paula and Ian did it, it was explosive. Like I'm still traumatized by them in that scene. It's all internalized. Or Assassination of Jesse James, or last month Blake and Bill in I never want to see that scene again. They Shoot Horses? Yeah, it's just horrible. I'd watch daily an Assassination of Jesse James any time of the week, though. And Ben, what's the scene Blake just did? What's that called again? I can't remember now. Hell or High Water. You get to these scenes where it's all internalized. And then from there, you jump to the scenes where there's no conflict, very little emotion, and nothing happening. And can they still be dynamic and amazing? Which is like, what do I say? Sideways. So once an actor gets to that place, then something happens. And I believe some of you in this acting class have been there. Certainly Blake, and I know Keenan has as well, which is there's a moment where you click, you're doing nothing, but you're internalized, you got all this stuff going, you've compressed, and now you're sitting there. And what happens is, instead of vectoring out, you're actually thinking, but you're no longer thinking as the actor. You're actually now thinking in character. And it's a wondrous, terrifying, and really cool, I know Casey's been there, really cool experience to have your thoughts be taken over and suddenly be within the thinking of the character themselves. And that's when you reach in and pull the audience in. And that's what Mark Rylance is doing. But of course, Mark Rylance has done 30 years of stage work and Shakespeare work and things to be able to get to that point, right? Now, you can't just jump there, because a lot of actors want to do it and they just jump there and then they just go back into being internalized. How can you think in character? Well, you better understand character. So even more so, to be able to do that, think in character, you have to be unbelievably prepared in your moments. And I know I'm preaching to the choir and repeating myself, but I was going to post something on Instagram again about if the base unit of music is the note and the base unit of dance is the step, the base unit of acting is the moment. You're not allowed to sing unless you know the notes. You're not allowed to dance unless you know the steps. You're not allowed to act unless you know the moments. And if you know every single moment so precisely, and you're so connected to it, and you know the emotionality and the relationship, and you've gotten your head to be vectored out and you're connected, and then you compress it, then all of a sudden you're going to switch into character thinking, and character thinking is really cool. Abby had a couple of them during Dark at the Top of the Stairs. It was a fantastic scene, and it was all very externalized scene. But when he was in the quietude of the second act, and he was just simply trying to put his wife at bay, he started having these like spontaneous moments that were all character driven. And that's when you've become a true actor, because a true actor is not acting, a true actor is being acted by the scene itself. Do you know? That's where the stillness comes in. So a director says less is more. It's actually about 25 minutes to explain what that means. So, you know, I want to make sure that you all absolutely, completely understand the concept behind that. Now, let's watch some Less is More. You guys into it? Mm-hmm. This is the scene that we watched over the weekend. It's from 1939. So which is so interesting because you go, oh, this is a time before we had, can somebody just vocally tell me that you can see this?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. It's a time before the group theater. It's a time before Stanislavski hit America. And when you're watching some of the other acting, some of the other acting in the movie's appalling. Like, it's really dated and fakey, and the guy who's standing up there is really, I think, atrocious. But our guy in this scene, whose name someone's going to look up, is superb, just a superb actor, and I think would sit face to face with, look at all the hats hanging, isn't that great? He'd sit face to face, you know, Casey Affleck or Jake Gyllenhaal or Scarlett Johansson, like, no problem.
I don't ask.
A little backstory quickly is a U-boat of Nazis has washed up on the shores of, I think it's Nova Scotia in Canada. That's why it's the 49th parallel. And they found themselves near a group of Mennonites who, of course, are of German origins, who are conscientious objectors and peaceful people against war. But because they're Germans, they've called them to join the Third Reich and take care of them and help them in their Nazi effort in Canada.
Ask where you come from or what brought you here. Although you've left us in no doubt as to your beliefs. Someone has given you, no doubt deliberately, completely false impression of us. We are only one amongst many foreign settlements in Canada. There are thousands of them in this part of the world, and they have been founded recently, some 80 years ago, by people who left their homes in Europe because of famine, because of starvation, because of racial and political persecution, and some, like ourselves, because of their faith. Some came only to find new land, new boundaries, a new world. But all have found here in Canada security, peace, and tolerance and understanding, which in Europe, it is your furious pride to have stamped out. You call us Germans. You call us brothers. Yes, most of us are German. Our names are German, our tongue is German, our old handwritten books are in German scripts. But we are not your brothers. Our German is dead. However hard this may be for some of us older people, it's a blessing for our children. Our children grow up against new backgrounds, new horizons. And they are free. Free to grow up as children. Free to run and to laugh without being forced into uniforms, without being forced to march up and down the streets, singing battle songs. You talk about a new order in Europe. The new order, where there will not be one corner, not a hole big enough for a mouse, where a decent man can breathe freely. You think we hate you, but we don't. It is against our faith to hate. We only hate the power of evil which is spreading over the world. You and your Hitlerism are like the microbes of some filthy disease, filled with a longing to multiply yourselves until you destroy everything healthy in the world. We are not your brothers.
Oh, I love it so much. I've watched it like 5 times since this weekend. Can you guys all hear it? Was it good? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. His stillness is so great. That's the great Canadian monologue. I think we have to do an entire class where everyone just does that monologue. I'm gonna record that and post that and stick that on YouTube, because I'm sure and most Canadians don't even know that. But I love it. This is Canada, the free. He's so unbelievably still, isn't it wonderful? He's so good. Examples of stillness. You've all seen this, I would imagine.
I wouldn't have it any.
Look at Hopkins.
I have to warn her. Oh no. Dolores. The things you do to her. The things you do to her. I have to protect her. I have to help her. She's got to get help. Very good, Mr. Abernathy. That's enough.
This behavior miles beyond a glitch here.
Access your current build. Is your name? Rose. Is it Rose? You say Rose. What is your itinerary? To meet my maker. Oh, you're in luck. And what do you want to say to your maker? My most mechanical and dirty hand. I shall have such revenges on you. Both. The things I will do. What they are, yet I know not. But they will be the terrors of the earth. You don't know where you are, do you? You're in a prison for your own sins.
Great. Have you guys all seen Westworld?
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. Is that not the most, that to me is one of the most amazing clips ever. That actor, somebody look it up who he is, because he's wonderful. He was like a day player actor who just killed it on that moment. Everyone watched that? Yeah, you all saw it? There's something in that clip that is even more so about stillness. It's not just, Hopkins is so still in that scene, but there's so much going on inside of him. There is the betrayal of his machinery that is the robots he's designed that are taking over. It's his guilt and his he has a whole plan that we know about by the time we get to a second season, and there's all these things going on inside of him, but he compresses it all and he just sits there and he barely does anything. But it's the other actor who, Mr. Abernathy, who is unbelievably good at balancing, dancing between, or you'd say, I don't know if we say titrating, between busyness and stillness, because this is about as, you know, big and expressed as we get.
I have to warn her. Warn her. Dolores. The things you do to her. The things you do to her.
Like, that is full.
I have to protect her. I have
See
to
how
help her.
expressive he is?
She's got to get help.
Then he does this wonderful robot stuff, this stuff here. He just freezes. Now, watch this moment where he goes from somebody who's that full to this still. Watch what this man can do.
Is your name? Rose. Is it Rose? You say Rose.
This right here. Ready? Look at the stillness. Now I'm so involved with his hatred. Look.
To meet my maker. Oh, you're in luck. And what do you want to say to your maker? My most mechanical and dirty hand. I shall have such revenges on you. Both. The things I will do. What they are, yet I know not. But they will be the terrors of the earth.
So this actor himself can go from a big, full playing everywhere to this unbelievable stillness and talk. It's not only very Shakespearean, it is Shakespearean. He's actually quoting Romeo and Juliet, right? And he's compressing his rage at the maker, at his God, and the betrayal that that's the word is correct. The betrayal of what the God has done to them, that they shut them down. That's so good. It's so intense, you know? So that's another example of stillness, but it's an example of somebody who can dance between still and I guess the opposite of still is full, right? Okay, I want to watch the master at work here. This is a scene that I wanted to show you, but I want to show you that first scene because there's this unbelievable juxtaposition between Damian Lewis's intense movement and rage, which is correct for the character and correct for the scene, and Mark Rylance's unbelievable stillness. But inside of Mark Rylance's stillness, it's very interesting because Henry's angry. He feels like he's been stabbed in the back. He feels like he's losing control, and so you get all that. But you're so more involved in Mark Rylance's world, Cromwell's world, and you're so stuck inside of Cromwell's thoughts because he's not doing anything, but he's receiving, and so you receive it through him. Do you all get that? I absolutely love it. I'm going to show you the next scene just so you can see what a man can do with nothing. You have to see that scene to understand this one. Look at him, Rylance, doing nothing, telling us an entire story.
And so,
all the backstory and forestory are in there, in that one shot where he doesn't do anything. I just like to show you that less is not always. Did you guys see that?
I just love it when he he's like stops for a moment on the other end and just fucking dies again. He just goes fuck.
He just like shut up, fuck. It's so fucking great. Oh wait a second. Oh, that's not. This is when he goes. It's so fucking great. Takes him like 3 hang up staring at the phone too. Yeah, so sometimes sometimes
I just love when he like cools himself down for a second, goes to speak, and then just goes fuck.
Yeah, he freaks out.
He just can't.
I know, I love that. Yeah. I was going to show you that, and then I was going to show you some Tom Cruise losing it in A Few Good Men, because that's also exceptional. However, I think we're going to continue with class now. So less is not less, or less is not more, less is less, more is too much. It depends on the scene. Do it correctly. Don't have any checkouts or habits. However, when appropriate, know the scene, believe in the scene, and surrender to the scene. And you should, if it's appropriate, allow the stillness to be present so that you invite the audience inside. You understand? So that we can then be part of your thinking. That's what compression of conflict is. That's what stillness is. Everyone understand?